we are going to go ahead and get started. So, the U.S. Air Force aims high in recruiting the best and brightest to support our nation's defense apparatus. So naturally, it recognizes the tremendous talent of its airmen to unlock innovation across the service. Joey Aurora and Steve Lawver are both with the Air Force Ventures and AFWERX. Joey directs ecosystem development for Air Force innovation. He strives to unite the country's defense apparatus and startup space to reshape how the Air Force invests in small businesses and meets national security imperatives. He is an Air Force captain and has served as an airfield operations officer in the United States and Afghanistan. He's facilitated startup weekends across the country. His colleague Steve leads the Tech Accelerator portfolio and is a program manager for Air Force innovation. He breaks down barriers for the warfighter to leverage commercial technology while reimagining how the Air Force partners, engages, and invests in non-traditional businesses. He is an Air Force captain who has served as a pilot for Air Force Special Operations Command and has multiple deployments under his belt. He also loves skydiving. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Joey and Steve, and we'd ask you to pop your questions into chat as you have them, and they'll take them as we go. Joey and Steve, over to you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join in today. Tammy, thanks for that wonderful intro. It was very kind of you, and it's been a phenomenally humbling to be invited to speak and share some of the things that we've been doing. So. Steve and I will take a few moments to sort of describe overall what is the structure of AFWERX, sort of what we've built. Then we were planning on going into how we're using an ideation platform to aggregate ideas from across the force, how we're crowdsourcing the best solutions from the commercial world and from our airmen, and then talk about AFWERX Challenge and then where we're headed for the future. We welcome you to jump into chat. We want this to be a dynamic conversation and answer the questions you may or may not have. And we're always open for follow-on conversations as well. So thanks. See if you want to say anything, go ahead, or I'll jump right in.
Joey, spot on. It's really good to be here. Thanks for the great intro. As Joey's going to go over here in a second, there's a lot of things we could talk about. He's going to give the high level top of the funnel, but we'll rely on you at some point to help to guide the conversation towards what is interesting to you. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat to see where people are from and what organizations, just to see what might be useful to you as well. But really excited to chat with you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks everyone. So the cool thing about AFWERX is that we started about 3 years ago. I think the official date was July 17th. 2017, so we're coming around there. Steve and I have actually known each other for about a decade now, so it's been pretty fun. And it was because of the relationships that I ended up here, and we've gotten to work with an amazing team to build out AFWERX. Our job is to really connect innovators and accelerate results for Air Force culture and technology. You'll see that it started off in a memo, right, as most things do in government, but the real thing was you have senior leadership in the department who are interested in growing and fostering innovation. Plus you have a groundswell of individuals and people around the organization who want to change the way things are done. And this was a beautiful moment of those things coming together. And for the Air Force, what we've done over the last couple of decades is really shrink who we're engaging with and how we're talking to them about what future technology and development was. We were just reaching out to the defense industrial base because in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, the government was the leader in fostering R&D. We were at the forefront of technology. But what's happened is that there have become so many other players in the room, and the private world is growing. Our allies have some cool technology. So how do we connect the dots between all of these different communities to leverage the entire ecosystem of ideas, of possibilities, and then bring those to defending our nation each day? So that's the purpose behind AFWERX getting stood up, was to be able to connect a lot of these dots. And one of the cool thing about the team that came together here is it wasn't forcing people or saying, hey, yep, you're into this role, go and figure it out. It was about bringing folks together like Steve, who were working on an idea already and wanting to execute against that, and then providing them the top cover and support to go and do so. Some of our key guiding objectives are we want to increase warfighter agility, and we have to implement those capabilities. And we want to do so in days and weeks, not in months and years. The other thing is our airmen, we have over 685,000 of them. We want to allow them to solve problems anytime, anywhere. Don't have to wait and go up for the big bureaucracy to address those. Let's go out, test, prototype, and implement that. And then let's continue to leverage the ecosystem at large. So I'm going to skip that. So the cool thing here is that we've created a lot of different programs over the last 3 years. And sort of the key model we're looking at is going back to some basic economics. Understand where the demand is inside of the Air Force and be able to capture that, and then match it to the supply from the commercial world. What product, service, or technology are out there that we can sort of connect together to the problems or opportunities that our airmen face. We have Spark Tank, which is like Shark Tank for the Air Force. We have our Spark Cells, which are semi-autonomous nodes. They're at each base saying, hey, I want to solve problems that we face. We have our virtual tools where we're connecting operations, being able to collaborate in real time. Our major commands are sort of the 12 business areas of the Air Force. And we have our senior leaders who have big problems they want to get after as well. Some of you may know we have our hubs in Vegas, Austin, and DC. We have our AFWERX challenges. We're going after big problem sets. The Air Force Ventures process, which we'll talk some more about, and how that's growing and addressing how we engage with small businesses to airmen problems. And then there's a ton of other innovation organizations being stood up in the DoD and federal government as well. So there's a lot of opportunity to collaborate and work on projects. Additionally, what supports a lot of this and is the foundation is ability to do agile contracting and acquisitions, the legal engagements. We also have to tell the story from day one. There was, we can go into a longer discussion sometime about, hey, how does the AFWERX logo look like the AFWERX logo? But we have to come up with something that is interesting and for people to engage with. And then we have to continue to train the force on how to do these things themselves. So we'll hop into Spark Tank real quick. It's we did it in 2018 and 2019 and 2020. So we're rocking and rolling with this program to really pick the best ideas airmen have and get them up to the Secretary of the Air Force level so that our airmen have a chance to feel heard. That's the whole point of this program, was to take sort of the best ideas that are out there and elevate them consistently so that those simple things as, hey, can we get away from replacing batteries for hours a day to going to rechargeable batteries that are going to last a lot longer. Those simple ideas sometimes do need to get elevated all the way to the top level of leadership, so they just have the support of getting done. Because in such a bureaucratic organization, our job is to provide stability and address the big problems. And sometimes we tend to skip over, a lot of the times we tend to skip over, hey, what are the day-to-day things that could make our airmen's lives better? So we'll talk more about that and sort of the platform of how we got there. One of the first year's winner was just addressing a change in the way instructors would sort of lay down and operate while they're on the aircraft. It was extremely painful for them to basically lay down on a flat board the entire time. And it made it really difficult for them to crane their neck back and hang out there. But the thing is, the airmen had an idea. What if we can make this a little bit more ergonomic, make this a little bit more comfortable to sit there? And what you find is that could save up to $100 million of health costs a year. And by partnering with the Vegas team and with the folks who are manufacturing these things, we took that timeline and developed, hey, they had a prototype, develop out what does this look like at scale. We got the cost down to around $1,000 a piece to deploy about 415 of these across the entire KC-135 fleet. And so the cool thing about this is an airman idea that they were facing a pain point and it wasn't getting through the normal requirements process. So we had to come in from a different angle and say, hey, this is something our airmen need to get solved. It has a huge cost savings in the long term, maybe not directly here on the operational side, but overall, it's still the government and still the Air Force paying for these challenges. So how can we provide a holistic approach to the things that we're doing? The other cool thing is this last year, automation is a huge thing for what we want to do in the Air Force. We're moving away from having our airmen hand jam into things. We're sort of moving into the digital age, and we want to facilitate that process. Again, an airman showed this idea was possible, and they're showing that, hey, this is the amount of hours you can save. And now that single idea that airman is championing is there's an Air Force-wide campaign for robotic process automation. And the key thing is an airman just showed, hey, how can I do little process improvement here at my local base? And can I get approval to do it here? Now that airman is championing it across the entire Air Force. And it's very non-standard for someone to take their day-to-day job and now add another piece onto it where I have to go champion this idea, share it with other people, engage with other stakeholders for buy-in. But that's been one of the key things for what has made AFWERX so successful. It's the chance and opportunity for an airman that is addressing an issue to work with other people and build a coalition of the willing to address the problems that they face. And what we've done is just give an avenue and a pathway for them to do that by letting them engage with senior leaders, by giving that consistent platform where they're getting support to get involved. The other cool thing is the Spark cells. We have about 80 of them across the Air Force, and this is an opportunity for folks to say, hey, what is the local issue that we're facing? Whether it's changing a C5 tire, whether it's secure comms during worldwide operations, or it's flight line of the future efforts for how can I do my maintenance checklists on a tablet, and so we can all have real-time syncing on this, or AR, VR platforms. We have airmen that want to address these issues, and we found that this is a wonderful model for understanding what problem sets are out there. And so, Steve, if you want to talk a little bit more about this, please jump in.
Yeah, of course. So the guy you see in the top left there, his name is Tony Perez. He would be awesome, I think, at some point to have on the show if you haven't already, but has kind of become a symbol of sorts for the voice of the operator and how they can get their needs heard and actually elevated. One of the things that is really important to us is not just the idea itself, right? And I think in the last decade, we've seen the venture community, the startup community, and a number of other really fast evolving sectors learn that ideas are crap, and I know that's kind of brash, but execution is everything. Right. And so when it comes to these Spark cells that are being stood up, in this kind of semi-autonomous nature where we're not telling them what to do, Tony's not telling them what to do, but rather he's created one, and then there was another and another where they focused on execution. And they would not only bring the ideas and the people with the ideas into one place, they'd say, okay, how do we take this from a good idea to something that's having an impact on the warfighter? And it was working. And so what has now happened is you see all the dots on the map there. In fact, I think there's more at this point than what is represented there. They all chose to create their own cells because they saw what it means when you get folks in the room who are learning to execute all the great ideas that they've always had. And the reality is that those who are doing the mission day to day are often the ones that have the ideas best to make that mission better because they understand it so well. And so one of the things that I think Joey would probably agree with it, that we as AFWERX as a whole have been trying to do is move the knowledge and expertise of execution of these innovation related things, whether that's how do you acquire the solution, perform the research and development, how do you interface with legal and finance, all those little minutiae that an operator who's doing the mission might not know. How do we get that knowledge as close to the left, as close to them as we can to enable them to execute themselves on that innovation? So, the one message I would have leaving this slide is our operators are capable of so much, especially if we give them more knowledge on how to do a lot of those innovation related activities. So execution is everything here.
Absolutely. And one of the other cool things here is that we're using a virtual platform to engage with folks across the board. And so we've stood up a platform to connect airmen and share these ideas across the entire Air Force. So it's been a lot of fun to see sort of what they come up with. And what I wanted to do here was actually give you guys a live demo of what that looks like. So the cool thing is that we've set it up so anybody can jump in with a login and two-factor authentication. So we're sort of moving away from the PIV cards that we're all used to. Give it a sec for my code to change over. And over the last 2 years since we've had this platform, we've had 44,968 airmen join as of yesterday. Hopefully we'll cross that 45,000 mark today. And that'd be pretty cool to do that in about 2 years. And what we did here is we gave a platform for anyone across the Air Force to sort of jump in and share their idea, to talk about, hey, here's the biggest opportunity that I see, and here's how we can get after that. So it's called the Airmen Powered by Innovation platform, and we branded it around the Air Force so that, and an existing program that was already in place, so that we could bring them sort of into the digital age and partner with them. Because one of the key things is AFWERX is not meant to organize and run programs for the long term. That's not how we got started. Our job was to just show there's a different way to do something, and then get buy-in from the structure of the Air Force to get up, run, and own that. So while we at AFWERX stood this up, we don't own this anymore. We've passed this on to the Secretary of Air Force's Management Division so that they can run and manage this program. So the cool thing is anyone can create a campaign. We have a really big one right now from our 4-star about how can we save airmen's time. You'll see the API open call where anybody can jump in at any time with their ideas. The different units across the Air Force can create their own challenges. We've also created a centralized place for us to manage the branding, help create the content and sort of the workflow behind each of these campaigns. And the goal there is to sort of take that work off of the individual airmen and allow them to focus on getting engagement and ideas while we centrally manage the campaign creation process. So over the last few years, if you really wanted to dig in, anybody here with a CAC card or a .mil can log in. We also have resources, stories, and metrics. So we're trying to be as transparent as possible with this platform so that airmen can see how many ideas have been submitted. We have over 6,000 ideas. How many of those are getting to execution stage? How many of those are, hey, we hit 45,069 users. Awesome. And what we're trying to do is drive the visibility into each of the major commands, into each of their local areas, because the end goal here and the vision for this is that we're using this data in real time to shape the requirements for our program offices, for our A staff, which is our executive level staff in the Air Force. We want them to use the latest data from sort of their day-to-day operations, like what problems are our airmen facing? How can I use that to shape the future programs? So that's, I see there's some chat comments here. Wanted to just jump in and see for this. So you're asking if this is a homegrown or we're using IdeaScale. We are using IdeaScale as our backend platform. We have completely rebranded it. If you want to talk about contracting or why this or future plans, happy to do so afterwards, Diana. And the other question we got is, how do we make sure this platform is in front of our airmen? So that's been one of our biggest challenges, is how do we consistently message? So we've talked a lot about, hey, we have a PA team and we're constantly pushing out stories from day one. We're trying to leverage big campaigns like the Saving Airmen's Time campaign, where the 4-star sends out a video message where it goes out to each of the campaign owners, where the wing commanders, which are the local base leaders, are pushing this out. And the Spark Cells, partnering with them and the CPI innovation teams to say, hey, this is what the opportunity is to have this platform. We also have something called the Air Force Portal, which is the home page where every airman, when they get onto their browser, is at. And we've worked really hard to make sure that one of these tiles, one of these campaigns is consistently promoted on the front page of the Air Force website. So you'll see sort of the spikes of growth in our metrics happen during times that the Saving Airmen Time campaign is up. The Spark Tank campaign, you will also see huge numbers of positive growth and engagement on the platform every year that we've launched Spark Tank on here. So this is the third year we're doing Spark Tank, and you're seeing that. I think we're starting to see that uptick in growth because of that. We've also, Steve, you want to talk a little bit about sort of the SBIR focus areas and how we're taking airmen problem sets and translating that to commercial solutions? I think that would be
sure. No, that's a really good lead into that. And one of the things that I think is relevant here is your initial question of how do we get this in front of airmen? Part of it is, yeah, you can leverage the star power you have, whether that's a program like Spark Tank, which has lots of celebrities and eyes on it that kind of get this visibility in, or whether it's your 4-stars who are announcing it. But that's just to get them in the door. And I think the reality is the long-term success of these programs depend on, do these initiatives lead to actual action and execution, and do things happen as a result? And what is it that user who submitted an idea gets out of it at the end of the day, right? And so if it's they throw some idea over the fence and nothing happens, that's a negative feeling for them, and they're probably not going to come back. If they throw something over the fence and they get feedback as to why they weren't selected, that's a little bit better. If they end up getting something funded that solves a real problem for them, they're definitely going to come back and they're going to tell their friends, and that's going to contribute to that organic growth. So, that last one is the hardest, of getting funding for the things that we want to get funding for. That is for everybody. One of the ways we've been able to kind of hack that challenge is the SBIR program. Right? So this has been around since the 80s. For the Air Force, is just under $1 billion per year that must be spent on small businesses doing innovative research. And the beauty of this program is that they are undifferentiated funds, i.e. at the beginning of the year, you don't know what we're going to spend it on, right? So you have the option, whether the typical way of doing this is you create many, many topics, each of which is tied to a certain mission need or problem area that develops these solutions from small businesses to go after and solve that problem. The way we've done it is we've created, through what we now call Air Force Ventures, a single open topic that occurs 3 times per year. And the open topic can be any dual-use technology. So it can be some type of AI powered technology. It can be a battery. It can be some kind of drone. It can be a software to improve efficiency. Whatever that might be, anything applies as long as it has some kind of commercial market and potential defense use case. The result has been a massive spike in the number of applicants to these programs every cycle. We do have within that, though, what are called focus areas. There's actually a campaign within IdeaScale to allow us to harvest those focus areas that come, and Joey's highlighting it right now. Those come directly from either SBIR program managers across the Air Force or just operators, users who say, I have a problem that I would like to get addressed via this program. And what happens is, even though any company can apply with any solution, as they're going through that application process, they can see the list of focus areas. And as they come in the door, they say, you know what? I have a solution that I think is good for the Air Force, and I see that someone is asking for this specific thing. And now what's happening is, you saw Joey's innovation, supply, and demand slide earlier. What's happening is you're now taking that demand from a motivated end user inside the Air Force and meeting that with supply of someone who can help them solve it. And then you're bringing to bear with that the funding of the SBIR program to actually make the rubber meet the road and fund some of these ideas. And so anyway, this is one way that we're getting people not only to submit their ideas with a good plan for execution, but to meet them halfway and fund those ideas for them.
And Steve hit the nail on the head there, that we are trying to source, hey, what are the best problem statements from those airmen? And we're using this platform to do so, and specifically a campaign around that. But the part of the reason that we're using the platform to do so is that we also have about 6,000 other ideas that airmen have put into here that may be related or may use this as one of the pathways, SBIR specifically, to address the challenges that they see. And we're trying to build a pipeline and a process that says, hey, if you have a problem, let's make sure you get the coaching and facilitation you need at the base level to truly understand what that is, and then go from there. And whether you use SBIR, whether you use FAR, Squadron Innovation Funds, use the FAR for just normal contracting, push out the requirement, you use OTAs, a commercial solutions opening, teach people about those pathways, and use this platform as a start to do that. So as you might have seen in the bottom earlier, I was showing we have the innovation handbook to guide people through this process. And we also have our support line and a phone number that folks can call and ask about these things. So how we got the metrics in here, we had our team use actually Power BI as a tool. We took the information and we're sort of shaping it out for the metrics and information that we want to see. And that's been one of the key things for us is we have a lot of senior leaders that are interested in this information, and we want to show them how we're taking a requirement from months and years and driving that, going from idea to fruition, whether that's no, we're not going to execute on this, or it's yes, we want to start pursuing something within 90 days. So we're trying to track those metrics over time and use this as a pathway to do so. So the last thing that we wanted to talk about is the sort of future of where AFWERX is headed. And I also see a question from Marina on sort of, hey, when is the next open topic? And I'm sort of happy to chat about that as well. Steve, I'll hand that one back off to you for 20.3.
Yeah, of course. So as I mentioned, we do 3 of these open topics per year. Each one for what we call phase 1, where, I didn't provide this context earlier, but phase 1 is usually a low budget feasibility study that investigates the potential applicability of the solution and the feasibility of executing that. Because it is an open topic, again, we get 1,000+ applications per round. We actually select several hundred to go into phase 1 and receive $50,000 or up to $50,000 and do 3 months of that feasibility study. One of the elements of which is what we call customer discovery. So they have a solution. They think they know who their customer might be within the Air Force, but we have 685,000 people. Right? So it's very hard to find out who's the actual customer at the end of the day. A lot of companies think that you go to a pilot or a maintainer and they can speak on behalf of the Air Force to buy what they buy. The reality is we have, as many of you do, a very disaggregated structure that involves multiple stakeholders. And so during phase 1, they have that time to confirm, is there actually a demand signal for their solution somewhere in the Air Force? Now, in some cases, if they responded against a focus area, they might get matched up with their problem sponsor, their end user inside the Air Force on day 1, which is wonderful, right? But if they can find that customer, they are eligible for phase 2, which is up to roughly $1 million per each cycle. The number can fluctuate a little bit. And the goal of phase 2 is to make the adaptations and the developments on that solution that they proposed in phase 1 with that customer that they found in phase 1 to be useful to them. Right? And then the question becomes, okay, what am I going to do with $1 million? In some cases, that is not enough to field a solution. We created a program that is called the Strategic Fund Increase that is meant to be for those cases that require a significant infusion of capital to become operationally useful. Right? And so it is up to $15 million. The number can fluctuate. We do it once per year. There's rules around it that I won't get into here, but in general, I just want to highlight, you've got your phase 1, which is feasibility study, ensure you actually have a demand signal inside the Air Force. Phase 2, make the adaptations of your solution to be useful to that initial customer. Strategic fund increase is the big investment that you may or may not need to scale that solution inside the Air Force with that Air Force customer or at the enterprise level. Now, to Joey's point of 20.3, the next cycle, that is the 3rd cycle of 2020, hence 20.3. It goes into what is called pre-release in August. And that means the instructions will post, at which time you can read through them and get a feel for how the program works. It opens for applications in September, and then it closes in October. For the phase 1s, the goal is 30 days from close of applications to making those awards. So it's a very rapid timeline. And again, when we talk about the so what, how do you get people coming back? Whether it's an airman coming with an idea and an execution plan, or a company coming with a solution, we need to give them a really good experience. Joey's platform that he's helped to create is beautiful. So the first step of that good experience is it's got a really great user interface and user design and user experience, right? So that's step 1. But 2 is give them a quick resolution on whether they've been selected or not, and give them feedback if you can. And so that's an important part of it. And that's where that 30 days comes into play for phase 1. For the phase 2s, it's typically 45 to 60 days for the selection rate. We do have what is called a direct to phase 2 option. So if you, as a government member, as an Air Force member, find a solution that you're like, you know what, we already know who can provide the solution for us. We've got a need that we want to get solved now, and we can skip phase 1. There's the opportunity to go direct to phase 2. Again, August pre-release, September open, October close for the 20.3 cycle. Joey, back to you.
Yeah, I'll pause there real quick and see if there are any questions before we go on to sort of our next topic regarding AFWERX Challenge and an external facing crowdsourcing method we've put together. So we've talked a lot about, hey, using the Airmen Powered by Innovation platform as our internal focus, connecting with airmen. We talked a little bit about SBIR STTR as sort of a pathway, connect airmen to commercial problems. We've also built out AFWERX Challenge, a way to crowdsource ideas around the biggest problems that we face. And so what I have here I'm showing is just went to AFWERXchallenge.com, just showing, hey, these are some of the biggest problems we're looking at. Right now, the integrated respirator information system is open. What we do is we take these problems that are really big. So if you look, Base of the Futures are our major event that we have going on. What we do is we do some problem scoping. We really define, hey, what is the issue here? And we try to take a deep dive, whether it was our space challenges or how we redefine family readiness, and we dig into what did that look like. We do a problem definition workshop where we actually gather all the stakeholders together for that, and we get academia, small businesses, airmen that are operating in that environment, the policymakers all together to really explore what that means. And then we take that information and we say, okay, we know we're committed to getting a solution behind this. So let's put it out there in a very easy to read manner. So if you look at the AFWERX Challenge website, right, this is probably not what you expect of a Air Force website when you're trying to read and understand a requirement. Now we're still gonna put it out on FedBizOps, we're still gonna put out those requirements. But what we're trying to do is guide this process. So instead of a 200-page requirements document, as we've done before for the helmet system, we did a beautiful one-page website, simple graphic. And before, where we were getting maybe one company to submit to that challenge, with the helmet challenge, we got over 100 companies to submit. We've ended up with 3 different operational prototypes and a partnership with multiple companies that have never been in this space before. And we're delivering an operational helmet within about 12 months that's going to operational flight testing. And that is decreasing the pipeline 3-4-fold to get to operational flight testing. And it's a 100x increase in the amount of companies. So the thing is, we've just realized, communicate a little bit better, get a simple, pretty website up, and engage with the commercial community to say, hey, to talk about that problem. And that's been one of the cool things for AFWERX Challenge, is taking a different approach to the requirements process. And that's been what's made it so successful in engaging with commercial industry. So the last part we want to talk about is sort of where is all of this headed in the future. You've seen and heard some about what AFWERX is doing. You've heard some of our initiatives. For me, what this means is about taking AFWERX into a place where we're actually shaping out requirements from airman-based information, right? We're taking the information they're sharing with us, the problems they have, and driving it to shape how policy is done. So when there's an issue with, it's called EFMP, it's like where families are changing where they're based off of their children's needs. The policies there are shaped for how those kids are, where they need to go. And that should be driven on a consistent basis. Steve, I'll pass it over to you.
Passing over for the question in the chat, or?
No, so that where you think AFWERX is headed in the future, where you want it to go.
Yeah, oh, that's really tough. So me and Joey have been fortunate to get to see this evolve from the beginning over the last 3 years. And one of the things that I think was the greatest part of AFWERX was that it had some flexibility to be what it needed to be at the time, right? And so we have a tendency, I think, in the federal government to, just as I talked about with funding earlier, to identify this is what you're going to do for the next 5 years, and we've put aside funding, and there's a whole list of items that you're going to do. The reality is that the tactical and the strategic environment changes so much. The state of technology changes so much that we don't know what we want to be necessarily, or what the country will need us to be 2-3 years from now. So when I think about what AFWERX becomes, no matter what it is, I want to retain that ability for us to be a sandbox and kind of this bug light for innovators with great ideas, whatever those ideas might be. And we don't quite know what that will be. You know, as some examples, and I think Joey alluded to this earlier, sometimes we pull in a program and we incubate it, we try it a little bit, and then maybe if it works, we scale it up and we give it back to somebody else in the Air Force. If it fails, we kill it and we tell the Air Force, hey, don't do this, it doesn't work, right? And only in very few cases do we actually hold on to it ourselves in a sustained manner. So I would say, as we evolve kind of more into this AFWERX, the next steps for us, which I think involve a little bit more of the acquisitions piece of how do we assist in taking those ideas and getting them down to prototype, then ultimately to fielding. We'll have a deeper role in that, but I always want to retain that sandbox mentality that allows us to continue to pivot and to spin in and spin out new ideas over the coming years.
I love that. So Tammy, you sent out another question. You've seen challenges from AFWERX, MGMWERX, including the current space study challenge. How do the different innovation hubs across the DoD work together? That's a question we get asked a lot. Actually, last week I did a webinar on decoding the DoD's innovation alphabet with DIU, Army Futures Command, et cetera. And the goal there is to answer that question. There's a lot of different projects that we end up working on together. If you take a look at how Kessel Run got stood up and spun out, it was something that what came out of the Defense Innovation Unit. And now Kessel Run and AFWERX have a great partnership on our infrastructure side. And it's one of the cool things is we find specific projects that we need to partner on. And with MGMWERX and AFWERX, it's the sort of the space challenges where we had it that informs and they're part of the stakeholder discussion of where we're going. We learn from them. We take the best, their lessons learned from SOFWERX. We've partnered with Army Futures Command and AFWERX on the joint open topic process. And at the end of the day, there's over 3 million people as part of the DoD. So there's tons of space and tons of problems to be solved. AFWERX has a large brand and reputation, but we can't solve and address all of the issues. It requires this partnership network facing and addressing things that are in their local areas and they best understand their communities. So wanted to take the rest of the time today to answer any questions you guys may have and anything about AFWERX, our challenge process, super open topic. Just wanted to see what you guys, what can help.
I want to thank you all for the presentation. It's been so informative, and I loved seeing the data that you're collecting and sharing with your leadership. What do you think, what do they seem to be most interested in? What are some of the metrics that you find that they're most keen on learning about?
I find that they want to learn, hey, has this idea progressed? Because they know that the bureaucracy tends to create roadblocks. So they want to know, have we actually executed on this? What roadblocks there are? And how many of these are actually getting into programs of record? Because until we can get these transition to programs of record, the senior leaders recognize that it's not going to be sustainable. And I care a lot about asking how our people are and where they're headed and what they're doing. Steve?
Yeah, so Joey kind of had the perfect answer there. The one thing that I would add is, even though what we call transition of the number of solutions that actually make it to the field, and one of the big ways that happens is as a program of record, which is the really big example, but that isn't always the case, right? Sometimes you can develop something throughout the course of one of these programs and it's just ready to buy and you already have the funding for it, or it's cheap enough that you don't need it to POM for new funding. So this concept of transition, which has multiple forms, is really what they care about. That said, it takes some time to play out. So we've found that the leading indicators are also really helpful. So all of those things that Joey showed you on the AFWERX challenge page about the number of impressions, the number of page views, down to the number of applications, down to the number of votes, down to the number of prototypes, those are all leading indicators. And we can start to measure that funnel, and it gives us a better idea of how many do we think will actually make it through to transition. And over time, once we know what percentage tend to make it all the way through to the end, we can look at those leading indicators with a little bit more authority and say, okay, based on the top of the funnel, we can estimate that this many will make it through to the end. So definitely transition is the thing we care about most, but in the time it takes for us to really figure that out, which can be a few years, we can look at leading indicators. One more I do want to bring up is the amount of outside funding that we're bringing in. So with things like the Air Force Ventures program, we do very much encourage matching from private industry, whether that's angel, venture capital, corporate strategic investors, just some type of money that's coming from someone other than the government to help us build out solutions that are also useful to us. That's a really important leading indicator because it's us growing the pie, right? We have a limited amount of budget, period, dot. But when we can encourage others to put their dollars against our needs, it makes our dollars go further. So they do care about that. And then the last one is we have our own pots of money for each one of these projects. But whenever we can point to someone else in the federal government, so not private in this case, but whether Air Force or some other service or agency, who's putting their dollars towards a project that we also care about, that's also really meaningful to us too, because that shows the skin in the game. And we think, and the hypothesis I think is proving true so far, that there will be a higher rate of transition in those cases where those other government partners are bringing funding to the table as well.
That's a good point. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
I know we have a question from Jara Metter, who is the director of the Challenge.gov program, and she's wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how you're building innovation and capacity building aside from prizes with your airmen.
So my initial take on that is it's kind of at the community level. It tends to be difficult when we, at the enterprise level, tell people to go innovate and go do these things. And I think that's really why programs like the Spark program, which again are semi-autonomous, decentralized, popping up at the base where they understand their own needs, and there tends to be a little bit of homogeneity of the mission needs that they're trying to address. That is really what gives us the staying power here, because they can develop things in a way that meets their own base culture or their own unit culture, solves their specific problems, but still is kind of the rising tide lifting all ships, in that we're teaching these innovation ideals to everyone through their own lens. Joey?
Yeah, the other thing is we're partnering with the SAFMG folks, Secretary of Force Management folks, on continuous and process improvement. We're changing up some of the education that we're sending to Spark Cells and CPI folks, trying to share some information on human-centered design, lean, agile. We're encouraging that kind of training. We sort of have a read list. It's about the innovation handbook we've created and are pushing out. We want to create virility around the education materials so that it's fun, it's engaging, and it actually helps people execute on their ideas. And that capacity has to happen on almost a one-on-one basis is what we've found a lot, which is why the Spark Cells are so important. And the partnership with CPI, the engagement on the RapidX program for how we're changing and shifting contracting. It's a lot of one-on-one training, but then we pair it with our major one-to-many events where we'll do calls with all the DoD stakeholders on how does this process work, where every week we have anybody can jump in and ask questions about where is AFWERX, what are we doing, where are we headed. I know Steve and I have probably done hundreds of informal engagements with our peers, with any airman that comes in about how can they get involved. We're leveraging the network effect for what we're doing, and we're trying to, in the future, we'll be creating a more structured pipeline for education.
Thank you for that. And I get the sense, I know that these are different times now, but I do get the sense that prior to current days, that part of your, part of creating awareness and getting people motivated to participate, that you were probably out and about and traveling a fair amount to reach different stakeholders. Is that true? Is that, really wanting to try and get more information on how you've been so successful at building these communities? I think we talked about some 40,000 plus airmen on the ideation platform and a larger community over 100,000. So what does that look like? If you could provide a little bit more detail on how you engage with these folks and how you
Yeah, I'll tell in a little bit of a story format maybe. I don't get to see Steve and the other teammates very often when it was pre-COVID times, because I think all of us were out traveling and engaging at different events. So I think the only times that we were in the office together, or like maybe even on the same phone call, it kind of felt like the AFWERX team was Avengers assembling, because we were all off fighting our own fights and engaging in going to the space, talking about where innovation is headed, going and talking to the program offices. You really had to build that coalition at a one-to-one level, find other folks who are interested, give them a little bit of a pathway to get involved, and let them run with it. We don't, like, AFWERX itself is only about 7 to 8 billets, and we are really, we have about 500 to 1,000 people who are working under the AFWERX brand, because we said, cool, you're doing something great, rock on. We'll provide you as much top cover as we can. So they felt connected to a movement in some way, shape, or form. And then we went to a different base and just engaged. And then it was a lot of follow-ups, texts, phone calls, emails. Hey, I'm frustrated about this. How can I go out and solve and address it? Well, those are the things we want to figure out.
Yeah, and I'll add onto that. Joey eats, sleeps, and breathes ecosystem development, so he is the best, bar none, at doing that. One of the things that I tend to be obsessed with is incentives, and how do we create an incentive structure that gets people to come to us, right? And so I think it's a really good pairing in that part of it is going out and bringing the word to other people, but the other part is to create a structure that gets them to want to come to you. And so a perfect example of that, in my opinion, is the Air Force Ventures program, where, again, in this phase 1, we're telling the companies, go find your customer inside the Air Force, and you got to show us that they actually exist. And we actually use that as a vessel for educating those individuals inside the Air Force too, because the way we represent, is there actually a customer for that company and their solution, is through a document we call the customer memorandum, and it's templatized. And every one of those points that we ask the Air Force customer to fill out as a way to communicate to us at the Air Force Ventures level that they're interested and they have a good plan, every one of those templatized like bullets in that document is in of itself a teaching mechanism, because we say, hey, is this company going to need access to your base? And they'll say, oh yeah, they will. I didn't know I had to do anything special for that. Or will they need a facility clearance? Or are they going to need an authority to operate on your software systems? And so just by them following the money of getting access to this cyber funding to solve their problem with the company, they're learning the kind of tactical nuance to get it done. And so I think, dollars really go a long way in incentivizing people. So whenever you do have dollars available, try to use that as a way to get people to become more proficient and educated at navigating our own complex bureaucracy.
Got it. Thanks for that. Well, I think we definitely want to open the floor to see if there are folks in the room who have questions or anything that they would like to ask directly of our AFWERX presenters. So we certainly ask you to let us know, what are your questions? What are your comments? Do you have feedback for our presenters? We have about 10 minutes left, Joey and Steve, and while we're waiting to see if folks have any additional questions, I thought I would ask if there's anything that you wanted to mention or anything that you might have coming up. I know that we talked a little bit about a couple of things that you might have coming up, but anything that might be coming up in the near future that you might want to mention to this crowd?
Yeah. We're always open to feedback. So AFWERX is ever growing and evolving. So if you ever have any comments, questions, or concerns, please reach out. And we'll happily share our email addresses. I'll put mine in chat here in a moment. The other cool events we have coming up, we have our Team Up event happening tomorrow. So a partner program with the SBIR is the STTR program. And we're talking about our solicitation release, how companies can partner with research institutions, and on the future growth and expansion of AFWERX. And that'll be with the 4-star Air Force Mobility Command Commander, the Vice Chief of Staff, Dr. Roper, and it's a great chance to learn about where AFWERX is headed and see what we're doing on the STTR side. We also have our huge AFWERX Fusion event. So actually in about an hour and 40 minutes, we'll be announcing our full agenda, speakers. It's an amazing lineup that we'll have this year. And that's July 28th, 29th, and 30th. And then we have the 20.3 round pre-release happening in late August. So there's sort of the big things that are going on. Steve, anything else you want to add to that? Or I'll start answering a couple questions.
You nailed all the upcoming events that I'm aware of. Just to put it out there, I see some of the folks in the chat deal with working with foreign companies, which is something that's really interesting to us and continues to be a challenge. When we look at the SBIR program, and I bring that up because I'm most closely affiliated with that, by law, it's for U.S. owned and controlled companies. But the reality is there are a ton of innovators out there in the world that we want to also be working with us on some really hard problems too. So if you are from a government organization that does regularly work with foreign entities in some way, I'm just very interested in what you've learned and best practices for that. So when we post our emails here, we'd love for you to reach out and we can explore some stuff there.
Yeah, and I think that someone's asked like, "Hey, how long will we stay?" And sort of what does the future look like? That's a big rock that we've wanted to tackle for a while. I think our next 3 to 8 months will probably look like scaling our operations and really being very sustainable, and a lot more follow through with the things that we're doing. We want to be very precise. We want to be at 100% response rates. Like that's, we want to make sure everyone feels heard and is heard. And then how do we tackle this foreign issue? How do we tackle the ATO issues that companies have an authority to operate on our networks within weeks? Platform One set a record for 4 days. But so those are some of the big problems I think we want to talk about.
Okay, great.
And Frank asked, how can industry help? It is by participating, by sharing with other companies what we're up to, and also by providing us feedback, what is and isn't working for you, so we can adjust our approach as necessary.
Yep, great. There are a couple of other questions that have come into chat. Benjamin asks, are you two going anywhere? How much longer do you plan on staying with AFWERX and AF Ventures? Do you see any changes afoot, or?
I think Steve and I will be around for a little bit longer. We're both pretty excited about where the future of AFWERX is headed.
Great.
Yeah, Ben McMartin, what are you trying to do? You trying to get us to come hang out with you guys over there?
Oh, that's that, Ben? Oh, man.
That's awesome. Yeah, you know, we're gonna stick around in this space, I think, as long as we can, as long as there's a place for us to keep doing this work. We've been fortunate in that because it is kind of a new field, or at least the way that we've gotten to address it has been relatively novel. That we've built up this corporate knowledge of how to do it, and we just really want to keep getting to use that for the betterment of the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
And you ask who the next Steve and Joeys are. Well, I would say we're finding them and we're creating them. It's Jared, Zoe, Garrett, the new members joining the AFWERX team, but it's also all the Spark Cell leaders, right? There's over 80 Spark Cells. There's 45,000 people on the ideation platform. There's 70 different campaigns. I don't know all of those people anymore, right? I don't know who they are, but the thing is they're not part of the community. They're jumping in, working, participating, the Air Force Ventures Fellows. And there's more people involved in this space today than there ever were from day one. That coalition building is completely changing because there's a lot more people involved. And, we're going to find and see you'll see brand new faces. Steve and I think have made a concentrated effort to try to get new faces on stage and actually pull back from some of our speaking engagements because, you see our faces a lot, but we had the fortunate opportunity to start this, but there's so many people on the team making this happen today. We're a team of rock stars, and it's without them, we wouldn't be where we are today. So.
Well, I think critically, I think you've also had your leadership support. I mean, this is something that was, your leadership had a mission, and so they invested in that. What would you say to folks who may be on this call who, maybe want to apply some of the tactics that you've discussed, or, want to kind of move forward with new ways of thinking or new ways of approaching innovation, but they don't yet have that sponsorship support. How would you advise them? And that's a big question with only 4 minutes left, but are there any words of wisdom that you might be able to offer to folks within federal agencies who, might be facing the challenge of kind of getting some ideas or concepts in front of their leadership and getting that support?
Yeah, my first biggest piece of advice would be to say, pitch it as an experiment. You don't have to completely change the program. Just go in and say, hey, we want to try this. And see if you can get your manager or a stakeholder or someone in leadership bought off on trying something a little bit different. It takes going above and beyond the day-to-day commitment of, sort of 8 hours at work. All of us got started by putting in blood, sweat, and tears outside of that time. And honestly, you might have to do that. And that's how you're going to get things out through past the start line, try and experiment, get someone to see what the results may be, and then with the results, convince them to double down on it.
Yeah, my perspective on that is I've lost count of the number of times that we've said out loud to each other in some form, there's no way I would have been able to do this without you, whether it's to Joey or to Chris or Jason or Jared or Zoe, whoever. And the reality is that if you are an army of one trying to get this done, it's impossible. Whether it's fighting the inertia of the existing system, whether it's proposing a new idea and not having a sounding board, like you need to have a partner in crime. So the first step, in my opinion, is find someone else who believes and is like-minded and balances out your knowledge and expertise, and get them come together as a team. And that's the only way to do this.
Thank you guys all for taking the time to listen and learn where we're headed. We're open to continuing to chat. We have an opportunity to transform the federal government. It's not the organization we join, but it's the organization we build. And we're looking forward to working and learning with y'all. And thank you, Tammy and team, for all being here.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us. I think there are a couple of folks who might still be interested in getting your email addresses if you want to pop those into chat. Thanks, Joey. Steve, if you want to add yours too, great to have it. As we're rounding the hour, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining today and to remind you that you'll be receiving a short survey following the event. We really encourage you to fill it out, and we'll look forward to your inputs. And with that, we'd like to thank you all for an hour of your day, and we look forward to seeing you next month with our next installment of the Federal Crowdsourcing Webinar Series. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, folks. Have a great day.